Mas Ipul. Yeah, okay. Alhamdulillah, praise to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, because today we can meet again with our distinguished guest, Mrs. Raja Ajrin Raja Ahmad, an associate professor at the Faculty of Accountancy, UiTM Cawangan Johor. This event is a joint collaboration between UiTM Cawangan Johor and D3 Perpajakan Trisakti. And this is kind of implementation of the MOU between two universities. The topic that will be taught by Mrs. Azrin today is related to activity-based costing. Okay, dear college and our dear student, not to extend the time, we invite Mrs. Azrin to start the lecture. Okay, please, Mrs. Azrin.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Ibu Hasna. Okay. And all the respective lecturers. So today, I think we just continue with the next topic that is on the activity-based costing. I start share my screen. Okay. Okay, for all the students, you can scan the QR code for the notes. Okay, the notes that I'm going to use for this class. So this one is the QR code for the notes on activity-based costing. Okay, you got the notes? All right.
Ya, sudah dapat.
Sudah ya? Sudah. Alright, okay, so we continue. So this is I'm taking this one from the Wagon textbook. It's on the activity-based costing. So what is it about? When you talk about at the end of the chapter, what are the things that you need to know? You need to be able to discuss the difference, what is meant by the traditional method of costing as well as the activity-based costing. And then apply the activity-based costing to a manufacturer, and what are the benefits as well as the limitations. And the activity-based costing is not only applied to manufacturing services, but it also applies to service industries. Okay, we move on to when you, I believe that you already look into the traditional way of doing your overhead. So when we talk about the activity-based costing, we are looking at, you want to determine the cost. So you want to determine the cost. How do you determine the cost? So when you want to determine the cost, in this case, we base on the activity. So that is the idea of activity-based costing. You want to determine the cost, you want to identify the cost. Previously, I believe that you know what are the elements of cost, your material, your labor, your overhead. So these are all your costs. But under the traditional methods, this one, when we talk about the activity-based costing, we are not talking about the material. Okay, we are not talking about the labor, but we are talking about the overheads. So activity-based costing is all about your overheads, right? So when you talk about the costing technique, traditionally, how do you allocate your cost to your product? So when you allocate your cost to your product, normally we use a predetermined rate. Predetermined means you already determined that beforehand. So that is a predetermined, and you already look into the job order costing, the process order costing, and so on, how you absorb your cost to your product. That is under the traditional methods. So for example, we go with this example. You have Atlas company produces two abdominal fitness products. One is called the App Bench. This is the first product. And you also have App Coaster. This is your second product. And then direct material cost per unit is 40 for App Bench and 30 for App Coaster. So this one, the given in the question, you have two products. Okay, one is called the App Bench. The other one is called the app coaster. Okay, so your direct material cost is $40 for app bench and $30 for app coaster. And then your direct labor is 12 for both, and your overhead is 30 and 30. So total, you just add them up, 40 plus 12 plus 30, you will get 82. Whereas for app coaster, 30 plus 12 plus 30, you will get 72. So that is the information given with regard to the manufacturing cost. So the elements will be material, labor, your overhead. Just add them, and then you will get your product cost, total direct cost per unit. So the needs for the new approach, why you need to go for the activity-based costing? Because it says that there is a tremendous change in the manufacturing and service industries, and then decrease in the amount of direct labor usage and significant amount of overhead. The idea is that when the manufacturing process becomes more complex. Now you use more technology in the production in the production process. No longer using a lot of direct labor. So direct labor will become a smaller portion in your manufacturing cost. Whereas your overheads, like the use of machinery, the depreciation, the electricity bills that you use to run the machinery and so on. So more machine intensive and more higher usage of the technology, and therefore there will be an increase in the amount of your overhead. What about the labor? So you have lower amount of labor usage and increase in the overhead cost. So that's the reason why companies are moving towards it means in terms of your portion that I say, if let's say you have your material, your labor, your overhead, now your overhead accounts for the greater portion. Let's say, assuming, let's say 60% of your cost lies in your overhead. So if a greater portion of your cost lies in the overhead, what happens? What's the implication if you wrongly allocate your overhead cost to your product? What's the implication? What happened? What's the consequences of that? Okay, so then your product cost will be wrong, or the correct term will be distorted. Okay, your total cost will be distorted, and therefore when you calculate the profit, that will also be a distorted or not accurate. Okay, so that's the implication of wrongly assigning your cost. So that's why they go for this new approach, and this new approach is called the activity-based costing. Previously means the traditional way of doing it. How do you do it? You use a plan-wide. What is meant by plan-wide? Plan-wide means or they use the single rate of allocating your overheads. The cost. I'm looking at your looking at your textbook. Hold on. What's the term that they use for the traditional methods of overhead? The ABC, the cost hierarchy. This one, activity-based costing. There are some books they use the term plan-wide. Some book they use the term single rate. Okay, it all means the same. Yeah? Some they use the word blanket rate. I'm not sure your textbook, your Hongren, use what term to allocate your joint cost. Okay, some books they use the word
same terminology.
Same terminology, plan-wide, plan-wide.
Yeah, plan-wide.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Another name for plan-wide is single. Another name for it is blanket. Okay, blanket rate. Okay, single rate. Okay, so the terminology means basically what is meant by plan-wide. So go back to the root word. When you talk about the plan, like the factory ataupun the kilang, okay, this one is the factory. So one factory, and then you just put a blanket over it, like you are taking just one rate, not you split into department. That is called departmental rate. If you have department A, department B, department C, that is called departmental rate. But we are not looking at the departmental rate. We are looking at just for the whole factory, one plant, the whole wide of the plant. So that's called as plant wide, means one rate only. So how much you want to charge the overhead? So you will say, let's say the $5 per direct labor hour. So that is the rate that you're going to use throughout. So that is why it is called as plan-wide or single, only one rate, that is $5 per direct labor hour, or blanket rate. Overall, will use $5. So that's the term about the plan-wide predetermined overhead rates. You are using the overhead rates. Now, why that is not accurate, why that is not no longer suitable to be used? So the answer is because, as I mentioned earlier, now most of the manufacturing process is more on the technology base. A lot of your cost means higher portion of your cost. So, and when I talk about higher portion, means out of 100%, let's say your overhead is 60%. So if your overhead is 60%, then that is a huge portion of your cost. So that's the reason you want to make sure that you allocate your cost appropriately, correctly. Okay, so that comes in what is called as activity-based costing. Meaning, now how do you determine your cost? How you allocate your cost? You allocate your cost based on the activity. So you need to know what are the terminology, what is meant by all this terminology. So what is meant by activity? So activity is basically any event, any action, any transaction, any work sequence that incurs cost when producing a product or service. It's either you produce product or service. Product or service, it means the same. You are looking at whether you produce a product or you provide a service. Product means you produce like a shampoo, you produce your handphone. Like service is like a barber shop, like doctor, they treat the patient, hotels, and so on. So that is service. So any business is either you provide product, you sell your product, or you perform a service. That is activity. Any event, any action, anything. And then activity cost pool, as the name implies, you are looking at the pool. When you talk about kind of swimming pool, it's a pool. You collect all the water. It's a swimming pool. Activity cost pool is where you pull together, you gather, you kumpulkan, all the cost, all the activity cost in one pool. So that is called the activity cost pool. Overhead cost attributed to that particular activity. Later we will see the example. And then cost driver, that is what drives you to incur a certain cost. The higher or the lower of that cost, that is called as the cost driver. That is any factor or any activity that has a direct cause effect relationship with the resources consumed. Okay, for example, I don't have forgot to include a blank space. Okay, let's say you want to go from one place to another. Okay, let's say you want to go to one place to another, and you let's say from place A to place B. Okay, if you want to go from one place to another, what drives you? You have to incur cost. You have to incur cost. Let's say the cost will be the petrol cost for your mobile. Okay, the petrol cost. So that petrol cost. So what question? What drives you? What causes you? What causes you to incur more or less of that petrol cost? Means you have to pay for your petrol cost. So what causes you to incur more or less of that petrol cost? The answer will be, what do you think? Untuk pergi. The answer?
Udah. Aman.
Anyone would like to try? If you want to go from one place to another, and then you are driving your car, and when you drive your car, you have to pay for the, I'm not sure, over there you call up a petrol or gas or
Bensin, Ibu.
Bensin. So what is the cost that drives you to incur more or less of that?
Maybe from the distance, Miss.
Okay, correct. Thank you very much for your reply. Correct. So that is the distance. Yeah, the distance. The further you go, the further will be the cost. So the distance is the one that drives you to incur more or less of that cost. So distance is the cost driver. Got it? So that is the distance will be the factor that have a direct cause and effect. The greater you go, the far you go, then the more cost that you have to incur. The more resources you will consume, and therefore the higher will be the cost. That is the cost driver. Okay, for the activity-based costing, there are various steps. Different book will use different steps, but basically they are all means the same. So here, it says there are 4 steps to identify finally what do you want to do. You have this particular cost, finally you want to absorb to your product. So what you need to do, identify first and classify the activity involved to the cost pool, and then identify what are the cost driver, and then compute the activity-based overhead rate. Okay, activity-based overhead rate, and then you allocate the overhead cost to your product. So those are the 4 steps involved in the how to do the calculation for activity-based costing. So let's look at the example. So this one, you have one overhead cost. Okay, you have one overhead cost. So that overhead cost, you split into activity cost pool. Remember, your activity cost pool is the place whereby you pool, you gather, you kumpulkan all your costs together. So one activity is called purchasing. Okay, all the purchasing activity is under one pool. And then keeping all your material is called as storing. So storing is another activity cost pool. Then you gather all costs that relates to machining. Then you gather all costs that relates to supervising. So these are the activity cost pool, and you gather all your costs. Next, what do? You identify the cost driver. When you identify the cost driver is basically what drives you to incur more of purchasing costs. So that will be the number of purchase order. The greater the purchase order that you make, then the more will be your purchasing cost. The storage, so you keep your materials in store, for example, or your finished goods in store, you incur cost. So when you incur cost, the amount of the area, maybe the greater, the more area that you have, the more storage cost that you need to incur. So that will be the amount of square footage or square feet or the square area. Machining will be the number of machine hours. Greater machine hours, more machining costs that you incur. Supervising, the more employees that you supervise, the more cost that you will incur. Once you have identified all your cost drivers, then you will then absorb into your product. So in this case, we have 2 products. One is our app bench, the other one is our app coaster. Then you absorb this cost to your product. The storing cost absorb to these 2 products. The machining cost finally absorb to these 2 products, and the supervising, using the number of employees, you absorb to these 2 products. So far, can you follow? If you don't have any questions, then I assume you understand. But if you have any question, then just stop me and ask, okay? All right. So can you try to answer this one? Indicate whether the following statements are true or false. So a traditional costing system allocates overhead by means of multiple overhead rates. Is it true or false? Multiple overhead rates, the traditional.
False.
False, correct. The answer is false because the traditional, they use the plan-wide. Plan-wide means a single rate, no many rates. Multiple means many. They are not using many rates, but only one rate. Okay, number 2, direct material and direct labor costs are easier to trace to products than overhead.
True.
True, because you know exactly direct material, how much is it? Direct labor, how much is it that you incur? But overheads, like you have the electricity bill, you have the depreciation for your machinery, your utilities, your supervision, and so on. So there are a lot for the overhead. So it becomes kind of more difficult to trace to your final product rather than your material and your labor. All right, number 3, as manufacturing processes have become more automated, more companies have chosen to allocate overhead on the basis of direct labor costs. Based on direct labor costs. Now you use more technology. So how do you assign your overhead costs? Are you using direct labor costs? So the answer is, how do you assign your overhead costs? Is it using the direct labor?
Using activity-based costing.
Correct. You are using, thank you for answering. You use activity-based costing. So this one is false. You are not using direct labor cost, but you are using activity as a basis to cost your overhead. So it is activity-based costing. So number 4, in activity-based costing, an activity is any event, action, transaction, or work sequence that incur cost when producing a product. This one is about the activity. What is meant by activity? Is it any event, action, transaction, or work sequence, and so on? True, eh? Just now we already looked into the definition of activity. All right. So this one, I mentioned just now, you follow the 4 steps. So if you follow the 4 steps, now look at the example. If we continue from the 2 products that we produced just now, app bench and app coaster. So let's say given to you, you incur a certain amount of cost. How much is the cost that you incur? You incur this cost total 900,000. So this total 900,000 that you incur, you have to identify to your the cost driver and so on. Where's the this one? You incur your cost and then not this one. Okay, same thing. You identify into your 4 activities and then identify the cost driver. So here you can see these are all your costs. Your cost is 900,000. Bear in mind, if you are using the traditional or you are using the activity-based costing, the total remains the same. The total amount of overhead remains the same. So identify the cost driver. Identify the cost driver. So if you say you have this one, manufacturing, setup, purchase order, product development, and facility management. So that you will use these are the cost driver given to you. Okay, for exam purposes, you are being given the cost driver, but in actual fact, in the manufacturing process, you have to identify what are the cost driver. For the students, for examination purposes, normally you will be given this cost driver and you have to identify the most appropriate cost driver for each of these activity. And then you are also being given for the use of the cost driver. So this one is the machine hours. So the next question is how much machine hours have been consumed. So given to you 50,000 machine hours. Number of setups, 2,000 setups has been made. Number of purchase order, 2,500 purchase orders have been made. Okay, and so on. So when you want to compute the activity, so that will be computes the activity based overhead rate per cost driver. So this one will be your overheads just now divided by your expected use of the driver for each activity. So 500 divided by 50, you will get 10 per machine hour. Take back your machine hour this one. So 100,000 divided by 2,000 setups. Where do you get all these figures? This one from here. Okay, that one goes to your this one. So this one is the amount of overhead. Amount of overhead must during your step 1. These are all your overhead. So these are all your overhead. Total overhead maintain 900,000. Just divide, okay? Divide with your expected use of the activity, then you will get this one. Activity-based overhead rates. That the rates that you're going to use when you want to absorb to your product. Remember, under the traditional method, we just have a single rate. No, here you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 5 rates. Okay. So this one, when you want to absorb to your product, given, okay, given that app bench and app coaster, previously you are being told this one is 50,000. That is the total. Okay, meaning you produce 2 products. Your one product is app bench. So app bench consume 30,000 and your app coaster consume 20,000. So 30 plus 20 gives you 50,000. Okay, the same goes for your number of setups. So for your number of setups, here you have 2,000 setups. So that 2,000 setups consists of 500 setup from App Bench and 1,500 from App Coaster. Next, you have all these things at 2005, meaning 750 plus 1, 750. If you have 2, means 1 plus 1, you got 2. 25,000 means 10 plus 15. So you get 25. Okay, so far, hopefully you are able to follow. Ataupun terlalu laju, just tell me if you cannot follow. All right. So I repeat. First, you have identify your activity and gather them in your activity cost pool. And then you identify your cost driver. And then what are the rate or the total for your cost driver here. And then this one you already been given the total for app bench and app coaster. This one is just the total. And you already work out this one, the rate per cost driver. This one. You already work out this one just now. 10 per machine hour, 50 per setup, 20 per order, and so on. So this one, when you want to absorb to your product, to allocate the overhead cost, so expected cost driver, you times with the activity-based overhead rates that you already work out just now, 10 per whatever, okay, per machine hour just now. And if you are doing for app bench, for app bench, it consumes 30,000. So that 30,000 you times with 10, so you get 300,000. 50 rate is your rate just now, times with 500, 50. Where do I get all this rate? You already work out here just now. Here, you already work out your activity-based overhead rates. Okay, you already work out 10, 50, 20, 100, and 2. So this one, 10, 50, 20, 100,000, and 2. You already work out. And if you are doing for app bench, you times with app bench. Okay, and then you get the total. You get the total. This one is your total cost. Okay, total cost allocated for that particular product, 460,000. Let's say you produce 25,000 units, meaning how much is the cost per unit? When we talk about the cost, we are talking about the overhead cost, because activity-based costing is all about the overheads. Okay, so you take 460,000 divided by 25. So this one will be 460,000 divided by 25,000. So you will get 18.4. That is the cost of overhead for 1 unit of app bench. Because you produce 2 products just now, so you do the same thing for your app coaster. So this one is your app coaster. You do the same thing. This is the amount of overhead. And then times with this one is the expected use, okay, for each of these. And then the rate, you take the same rate, so you times this one, so you will get the amount here. Okay, so total here, let's say you've produced 5,000 units of app coaster, so you will get 88 ringgit per unit of your app coaster. So this one for app coaster. So if you look at the traditional versus the activity based, okay, given in the question just now, our direct material, if you are using, let's say we take for app bench, okay, for your app bench, under the traditional approach, remember the 82 just now from the very beginning. This one, you are taking from the very beginning that I show you just now. This one, 82 and 72. Right? This one app bench and app coaster using the traditional method. Material cost is 40, 12, and 30. This one 30, 12, and 30. So 82 and 72. That is under the traditional methods. Where is it? This one 82 and 72. All right. Under the traditional. If you are using the activity base, now if you are using the activity base, direct material remains the same, direct labor remains the same. The one that we want to highlight is just the overheads, the overheads. So if you were to look at the overhead under the traditional method just now, it is 30, but under the activity based costing, you already work out it is 18.4. So 18.4 for the overhead. So when you add on, you will see your total cost under activity-based costing is 70.4. Then you do the same thing for your app coaster. In the app coaster, again, material remains the same, labor remains the same, but your overheads under the traditional just now is 30, but if you are using the activity-based, it is 88. So that 88, so you will have 130. So what's the implication? The implication is that this one, if you are using the traditional method to allocate your overhead, then what happens? It is overstated by 11.6. So then let's say this is if under the traditional costing method, then let's say you sell your product. What happens? This one, you sell your product. Okay, you sell your product, you will add on something. Okay, let's say if this one, say you say your cost is 72, and then what happens? You sell your product at 100. If let's say you sell your product at 100, you say that you are making a profit of 28. Remember the selling price minus your cost, right? Selling price is 100 minus 72, then you say you will get 28 as your profit. But in fact, if you sell at 100, your cost in fact is 130. So it's actually you are making losses of negative negative 30. Okay, in fact, you are making you're not generating profit. In fact, you are making losses. So that's the reason for the use of ABC. What happens? Because ABC will provide you in a more accurate way of assigning your cost. So now I want you to try and do the exercise first before I. Any question? Is there any question? If you can't follow, then just stop me and ask. Okay, so now I want you to try and do a simple exercise first, just to test your understanding on this issue. Okay, try to scan this QR code so that it can bring you to the exercise and we can do it together. Sudah ya?
Ada yang nak tanya? Itu
Ya,
Bu
sila.
Azrin.
Ya, sila.
Silakan. Tadi siapa yang raise hand?
Gak usah
tadi?
dikasih kalau mau.
Ya. Ya, sila.
Tadi ada yang raise hand.
Sekiranya ada sebarang pertanyaan, just stop me and you can ask.
Oh, tampaknya ada masalah.
Alright,
Mumpung
okay.
anu,
Tidak salah klik.
mumpung segerna.
Okay, once you have scanned this exercise.
Silakan.
Ya.
Ada yang mau tanya? Boleh pakai bahasa Indonesia ya, Bu Azrin
Boleh.
juga paham.
Silakan.
Adakah yang mau bertanya? Oke, tampaknya belum ada, mungkin latihan ya, exercise mungkin Bu Azrin.
Ya. Sudah ya? Mana exercise? Exercise.
Kasihlah. Kasihlah.
Bagus.
Iya.
Itu Zoom-nya tolong di mute ya.
Alright, so we have this one. You already have the question, eh? Okay, Melissa Fabric has budgeted overhead cost. Now the total overhead cost is 955,000. And then it has allocated overhead on the plant-wide basis to its two products. You have two products. One is called wool, the other one is cotton. And you use direct labor hours. And then total direct labor hours is 477,500 hours for the current year. Okay, can you follow the question? You have the total of it cost, the total of it cost 955,000, and then this one is the direct labor hours. Direct labor hours 477,500. All right. Okay, this one. And then what happens? The company has decided to experiment ABC. They want to use ABC, and they have created two activity cost pool and the cost driver, activity cost driver. So what are the two cost pool? They say one is cutting, the other one is design. And cost driver for cutting is machine hours, meaning the more machine hours that you have, the greater will be the cost in the cutting department for that particular product. You have two wool and cotton. And then the same goes for your design. So design, the cost driver is the number of setups. So overhead allocated to cutting cost pool is 400. And for the design is 555. If you were to add these two, means 400 plus 555, you will get this figure back. 955,000. Correct? Total remains the same. Okay. And then you are being given, this one is the machine hours for wool. This one is the machine hours for cotton. This one is the number of setup for wool. This one is number of setup for cotton. Then what is it that you are required to do? Determine the amount of overhead allocated to wool product line and cotton product line using ABC. So you want to determine the overhead allocated using activity based, and then B, what is the difference between the allocation of overhead using the ABC and the traditional just now? Okay. You want to read first the question, then we do the answer together. I just give you 1 minute to read the question and do the question together.
Artinya itu.
All right. So this one, when you do for the activity cost pool, so remember just now you have cutting and you have designing. Okay, what is the cost driver given in the question? The cost driver for the cutting department is machine hours, and for design is the number of setup. So that will be cost driver is the machine hours, and this one is the number of setups. Okay, how much is the estimated overhead cost? So look from the question, the estimated overhead cost given to you just now is 400 and 555 to design and overhead to cut, sorry, cutting is 400 and the design is 555. So that will be 400 and 555. Okay, hopefully you are able to follow. Okay, just as this one is just extracting the information from the question, and then we move on to the activity cost pool that you have will be the cutting and design. So cutting the overhead divided by your cost driver. So that will be 400,000 divided by 200,000. So you will get 2 per machine hour, $2 per machine hour. For design, that will be 555 just now. 555, that is your dollars divided by your cost driver. So your cost driver, how much is it? Your cost driver?
500.
Yeah, you have to divide. You have to total this one up first. I just in the question, sometimes they don't give you the total, you have to work out. Sometimes they give you. So this one, 100 plus 100, you will have 200. Okay, this one 100, 1000, plus 500, you've got 1500. You take the total of this cost driver. Remember this one? We take the total when you divide this one. Mana tadi? This one. Okay, you divide by the total. Remember this one? This one is the total, whereby this one consists of your two product, bench and coaster. 30 plus 20, you've got 550. 30 plus 20, you got 50. So this one you divide by 50 tadi. So this one you got when you work out this one, you've got 500 divided by 50. So you've got 10. This one is the total. This one is the total. So when you work this out, so you have to take the total. You divide by the total. So here you will have your overhead divided by your total cost driver just now is 1,500. So you will get 370 per setup. So far, can you follow or difficult to follow? Boleh ya? So when you want to work out for the wool and cotton, so this one for the cutting department, that will be, you take the this one, your 2 per machine hour. For cutting, that will be 2 per machine hour, $2 per machine hour. So you have to times with the, as the name implies, $2 per machine hour. So you have to time with the total machine hour consumed by that particular product. So wool, how much is the machine hour? So from the question, wool, machine hour for wool is 100,000. So you have to times 2 times 100,000 machine hours. So you will get 200 lah, 200. And then for the design the rate is 370, this one, per setup. So you have to times with the number of setup for wool. Number of setup for wool is 1,000. So you times with 1,000. So you will get 3,703. So 200 plus 370. So you will get 570,000. So you do the same thing for cotton. So cotton just now, the rate is $2 per machine hour. Then you times with the machine hours. Times with the machine hours. In the question, the machine hour for cotton is 100,000. So you times 100,000. So you will get 200,000. And then for the setup is 370 per setup. So you will times with the number of setup. Number of setup is 500 for cotton. So you times 500. So that will give you 185,000. Sorry, 85. So total will be 385,000. So that is total cost assigned using activity-based costing. Okay. If you are using the traditional, so the question says, determine the amount of overhead allocated to wool and also cotton using ABC. Now, part B of the question requires to look at the difference allocation of overhead and overhead to wool and cotton, but you are looking at ABC and the traditional. Now, under traditional, what do you use? Direct labor hours. So what do you do? In this one, you assume that you allocate using the direct labor hours. So if you are using the direct labor hours, total overhead, I say remains the same. Total overhead. Total overhead is the same regardless of whether you are using traditional or ABC. If you are using traditional, total is the same. If you are using ABC, total is the same. So how much is the total overhead?
$955.
Okay, thank you. Very good. 955,000. And then divided by the total direct labor hours that you have from the question. Total direct labor hours from the question, 477,500. Very good. Thank you. So that is 477,500. So you will get $2 per direct labor hour. So $2 per direct labor hour. Under the traditional, if you are using wool, for wool, that will be in the question, it states that assuming direct labor hours were incurred evenly between wool and cotton. Evenly means they are the same. Okay, you just divide it by 2. So they are assigned the same. So that will be 477,500 divided by 2. So 570. So the wool product line is assigned how much? Try and work it out. Do you understand? This one, the question states that the direct labor hours were incurred evenly between the wool and cotton. So the direct labor hours, this one, direct labor hours. So direct labor hours total is 477,500 hours, meaning 477,500 evenly between wool and cotton means you divide by 2, so you will get 238,750. So what is this? This one is the hours for wool, and 238,750 hours for cotton. All right. So this one is the hours, and the rate, the OAR, the plan Y that you have worked out just now is 2, right? This one under the traditional. Under the traditional method, you work out is 2 per direct labor hour. So that will be 2 per direct labor hour. So you have to times with the direct labor hours. So direct labor hours you work out just now is 238,750. So you will get This one 477,500 for wool, and then for cotton is also 2 times times 2, 3, 8, 7, 750. So again, you will get equally 477,500. So what can we say from here? Under the ABC, you assign 570 for wool. Under activity-based costing for wool, you assign 477,500. This one is traditional. Okay, under the traditional. So what can you say the difference between, if let's say this one is traditional, under ABC just now, under ABC, we have assigned 570,000. So what can we say? How much is the difference? Difference is 92,500 as the difference. So wool has been assigned 92,000. Or what can you say? So for this one, what happens? When you use overhead cost, when you use the traditional method, this one is being under costed. Okay? This one, the wool. Whereas the cotton, you look at the difference, 477, and just now under ABC is 385. Cotton is 385 under the ABC. This one is under traditional. So you can compare. So this one, how much is the difference? 92,500. Okay, the difference. What happens? One is more being assigned, the other one is less being assigned. So then you can relate your answer to the competitiveness of the product. Okay, this one is quite easy. Maybe some question, if you want to try, you can also try this one. The same thing that I say, you look at the this one, the top management of Aquaflow Solutions manufactures two model. Any question that you want to ask? Okay, so if this one, Aquaflow Solution manufactures two models of vacuum flask water dispenser. So you have one, this is product 1, this is product 2. Okay, currently the company using the traditional, currently you are using traditional, and overhead, currently you use direct labor hours. And then now the top management interested in changing the current method to activity-based costing. So as a new assistant financial controller, you are required to make a proposal to the top management regarding this matter. You are being given the budgeted production and cost detail. Okay, you have been given production means the number of units that you produce for WD3 is 10,000 units and for WD2 is 8,000 units. Direct material cost 40 and 35, direct labor cost 20 and 17. Direct labor hour per unit means to produce 1 unit, you require 2 hours. To produce 1 unit of WD3, you require 2 labor hours, and this one only 1 labor hour. For the machine hour, WD3 requires 1.5 machine hours, and this one requires 2 machine hours. And then with regard to the activity cost pool and the cost driver, you are being given the total amount of overhead, total 756, and these are the cost driver. So the cost driver volume for each model means for each of the product. So this one, so you will have WD3 is 20. So you know 20, if you plus 8,000, you will get a certain amount. That is your total for the cost driver, the total of your cost driver. Okay, and then you are required to compute the production cost per unit. Now you are required to compute the production cost per unit using the traditional and using the ABC. So if you are using the traditional methods, okay, if you are using the traditional method, so again, what's the formula to calculate your overhead absorption rate. OAR means overhead absorption rate. So overhead absorption rate is you take the total amount of your overhead. So that will be total overhead will be here. Total overhead is your 756,000. So 756,000. Okay, this one. Divided by your total direct labor hours, 756,000. So you are taking 756,000 and total direct labor hours. In our first question, you are being given the amount of total direct labor hours. But in this question, you are not being given the total direct labor hours. So how much is the total of your direct labor hours?
28.
All right. So you divide by your 28,000, or you can, if this one divided by your 28,000 hours, or you can work, it comes from your, this one, 20 plus 8, or you can say this one, to produce 1 unit, you require 2 hours and you produce 10,000 units. So 2 times 10 or 1 times 8. Again, this one you already been given the information 20,000 and 8,000. So you will get, this one will be 27 per direct labor hours. So that is your OAR, or we call the plant-wide rate just now. The plant-wide or the single or the blanket rate is 27 per direct labor hour. But that is not accurate when you want to assign your cost. Why? Because of you want to use the activity-based costing, so you will have different rate. So you assign your cost to the activity cost pool. So when you assign your cost to the activity cost pool, you have how many? Based on the question, you have 4. You have 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have 4 activity cost pool. And you are being given out of the 756,000 of your overhead, you assign to each of these activity cost pool. So you just take your activity cost pool. That means your assembly, your machining, your order processing, and your purchasing. And you work out the cost pool rate. You work out the cost pool rate. Can you give me the cost pool rate for assembly? How much is it?
$350,000.
Okay, correct. $350,000 divided by this one, total cost divided by your cost driver volume. How much is the cost driver volume for assembly? Divided by
By 28.
Direct labor hours.
Direct labor hours is 28,000 direct labor hours. So you will get
12.5.
okay, very good. Very good. 12.5 per direct labor hour. Then you do for all, for machining. Once you know how to do this one, then you make sure you know total cost you take from machining, take from the question just now. So machining is the cost is 310,000, and then the machine hours is the total of these two. Okay, that will be this one. 310,000 divided by this one, machine hour, divided by your machine hours, because machining, the cost driver is machine hours, divided by total. This one, total divided by the total cost driver volume. Divided by the total as well. Okay. So this one divided by 31,000, right? So you will get 31 divided by this one. So you 31, yeah. You'll get 31, 31, per machine hour. No, sorry. 10. 10 per machine hour. And then you do for order processing and also for purchasing. How much do you get?
$6,000 divided by 1,100 is gonna be $60 per customer order.
All right, very good. And then for purchasing,
30,000 divided by 400, it's gonna be $75 per material order.
all right. Very good. So this one, once you got the cost pool rate, what do you do next? This one, after you've got the cost pool rate, then you have to absorb. This one is just the rate, because if you were to compare under the traditional, we have only a single rate that is called the OAR, overhead absorption rate. That is the rate we say we use the direct labor hour. But when you use activity-based costing, you say that different activity will have different drivers. Okay, different drives you to incur more or less of a certain cost. So you cannot simply take one single rate. So that's why under activity-based costing, you want to cost your product based on the activity. So you split your activity into 4. So you have the activity-based cost pool. So each of these, you will have its own rate. So that's what you are doing here. So you have, instead of one rate, you have multiple or more than one based on the cost pool that you have just now, based on the activity cost pool. So this one, you have the 4 rates. So once you have the 4 rates, my advice is put here so that you know what to times with. So mau didarab dengan apa? You have this one. So your total overhead, so you work out for this one. You have the 4 just now. The 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have the rate. You have the rate that you already work out. Okay, the rate here will be 12.5 per direct labor hour. So you put here 12.5 per direct labor hour. So you have to times with your direct labor hour for WD3. So look from the question, for WD3, the cost driver that you have is 20. Okay, so you times with 20. So you times with 20,000. So you will get 250,000 here. And then you do the same thing for machining, order processing, and purchasing. So 10, 60, 75. 10, 60, 75. So you have here 10, 60, 75. And then this one is per, you identify just now, per machine hour. Machine hour. So you have to times with the machine hour. If for WD3, if this one is per customer, 60 per customer order, because this one is order processing. So per customer, each customer order customer order, how much is the cost? So you have to times the customer order. So 60 times the customer order. From the question, you are being given the information that for WD3, this is the consumption. Okay, for customer order, there are altogether 800 customers order. There are altogether 270 material orders for WD3. And then you do the same thing for WD2, right? So you will arrive at your answer later on. So this one will be 75. Then you have to times with 270. So finally, you will get your total overhead as, this one will be 10, 15, you get 150,000. So this one times purchase order processing will be times 60 times 800. And then 75 times 270. So total overhead you will be 468,270. 250. And this one, your total overhead will be 287,750. And then if the question asks you to work out per unit, okay, work out per unit, what do you need to do?
Divided by the number of units.
Correct, very good, thank you. So divide by the number of units produced. From the question, okay, from the question, you are being given the number of unit produced. So the number of unit produced, this one, the production, 10 and 8,000 units. 10,000 units and 8,000 units. So you divide by 10,000 units and 8,000 units here. So you will have like 46.83 and 35.97. So as I say, that is the activity-based costing, total overhead cost based on the ABC. Cost statement, if you are required to prepare the cost statement, you add the direct material. As I said, direct material is the same regardless of whether you are using traditional or ABC. So that direct material is 40, here is 35. Direct labor here is 20, here is 17. And then you will have the prime cost when you add these two together, that will be 60, that will be 3, 4, 5, 52. Okay, and then overhead. If you are using the ABC just now, this one, so your overhead is 46.83 and this one is 35.97. So that gives you the product cost per unit of 106.83 and 87.97. That is the product cost. This one is the overhead cost under ABC, and this one is the product cost when you include direct material and direct labor. Hopefully you understand up to there. Okay, and then the question also asks you to compare the production cost and state whether the traditional methods have overstated or understated your product cost. So if okay,
So
so your
zoomnya ya.
okay, product cost under ABC. So product cost under ABC is 106.83 and 87.97. Whereas under the traditional, just now, it is 114. You already work out under the this one. We haven't worked out the under the traditional just now. Direct material, direct labor remains the same if you are using the traditional or ABC. So just now 40 and 20, prime cost is 60. Just that your overhead just now is 27. This one, you work out the 27. So take that 27 times with the 2 hours. So you will have 54. Total 54 plus 60 will be 114. And this one, again, it's 35 plus 17. You've got 52. And then this one, 27 times 1. Where do I get 1 and 2 from the question? This one, 1 and 2 hours. Direct labor hour for WD3, WD2. 2 and 1. So here 2 and 1. 2 hours and 1 hour. So 27 times 1 is 27. So you will get 79. So you compare 114 and 79 here. 114 and 79 under the traditional. That will be 114 and 79. So what happens? Difference is 7.17 and 8.97. What can you say from here? So under, let's say WD3, the traditional system has overstated or understated the product cost.
overstated.
Okay, has overstated. Traditional system has overstated the product cost by 7.17, and this one, traditional system has
Understated.
understated. Okay, it has understated the product cost. So what is the implication? Implication of using the traditional methods. So if you wrongly assign your cost, so what happens? Your product cost will be overstated or understated. What's the implication? If let's say your product cost is understated, so if your product cost is understated, what happens? You think that you are making profit, whereas in fact you are making losses. What happens if your cost is overstated? Okay, if your cost is overstated, then you are not being competitive enough. You are not being competitive. Why? Because you will sell at a higher price because your cost is higher. When your cost is higher, then you will finally sell at a higher price. When you sell at a higher price, when they found out, hey, our competitor is selling at a lower price, well, how can they sell at a lower price? And then we assume the quality are the same and so on. So what happens? Your customers will go to your competitor. They don't want to buy your product. So if they don't want to buy your product, what happens to your profit? So meaning you are not being competitive. So if your cost is overstated, that's why it is encouraged for the business to use the activity-based costing, as it will result in a more accurate costing and it will not distort your product cost. Hopefully you have some idea, you have a better understanding on this one. So saya nak tengok on your textbook je. So so the idea is that okay, if you would now I go, hopefully any question? Faham tak pengiraan yang saya tunjuk tadi? Yang pengiraan ni semua faham tak? Boleh Boleh?
Paham.
Faham, very good. Okay, so I just want to highlight in your textbook, Hongren, on the activity-based costing. From activity-based costing, it will then lead to activity-based management. So when you talk about the activity-based costing, this one they'll give an example for LG company, LG in South Korea. What happens? They change to the use of ABC in dia kata in 2009, they have a new Chief Procurement Officer in 2009. Dia kata now instead of using the traditional base, dia nak tukar kepada activity based costing. So when they did, when they changed to ABC, so dia kata dia dah save 4.7 billion in direct material cost and so on. Okay. Okay, you can read lah in your textbook what happens. So they changed to the activity-based costing. So this one, they come across the word under costing and over costing. The same like I explained just now. What happens if you over cost your product and under cost your product? Kan? So the product under costing, a product consumes a high level of resources per unit but reported to have low cost per unit. So this one, the same goes yang kita buat ni tadi, whether I say this one overstated, saya kata overstated or understated, dia guna perkataan over costing and under costing, sama lah. Okay, overstated the cost and understated the product cost, or they use the word over costing and under costing. Okay, and then what is product cost subsidization? Product cost subsidization means you provide a subsidy. I'm not sure in Indonesia what do you call. In Malaysia, we also use the word subsidy. When the government like gives some kind of funding to the people, that is called subsidy. So this one, what is meant by product cost subsidization? Meaning now when that your cost is under costing, tadi understated tadi, when your cost is understated, okay, when your cost is understated, what happens? The product that give you more benefit will cover the cost of this product. Means let's say WD3 have to cover the cost of WD2 because you have undercosted your product. So this product is under costing, but that cost somehow need to be covered. The company need to cover. So who's going to cover that cost? So means another product need to cover that cost. That is meant by product cross subsidization. You have A and B, so A have to cover B, something like that. That is cross subsidization. And then how to do a simple costing system, design, manufacturing, distribution process. Okay, single indirect cost pool. So this one, they say that you use the term single indirect cost pool. So single means only one. So this one is the company, plus team currently has a simple costing system that allocates indirect cost. Indirect cost means overhead. So indirect cost, overhead. Now they use a single indirect cost rate. Single indirect cost rate yang saya kata tadi plant wide lah. The plant wide, single, blanket. Setengah buku dia guna perkataan single indirect cost rate. Satu je cost rate that you have. So that is a single direct. Dia guna direct labor hours. Okay, ataupun dia guna production or manufacturing labor hours. So daripada, then you assign to your product. Okay, direct material. Okay, campur dengan you guna your direct cost dan your indirect cost tadi lah. We are talking about the indirect cost. So for your indirect cost means your overhead. So your overhead you guna a single rate saja to allocate. Kan bukan ada banyak, not multiple. You just use one rate or single rate. Okay. So this one dia ambil the direct material sama, direct labor and then total cost. Then indirect cost means your overhead lah. Indirect cost allocation, your overhead dapat you punya total cost. Okay. So this one macam saya kata tadi, budgeted total cost. Okay, that budgeted total cost with the base tadi. Base tadi macam in this case, I just saying apa yang dia buat dekat sini is actually sama dengan what I teach you here, whereby here yang 27 tadi. The one that you have kan. So this one is how you get the 27 is you take the estimated. This one you are doing the estimated overhead kan. Total overhead you divided by total direct labor hour dan you dapat this one rate. So in your textbook you ambil your total overhead tadi. So divided by your total labor hours. So this one panggil you punya buku use the word direct manufacturing. Saya kata total direct labor hours sama lah. So total direct labor hours means direct manufacturing labor hours lah. So you dapat this one rate per direct manufacturing labor hour. So you dapat that rate kan. Then baru you boleh compute your product. Next you kata you guna the ABC pula. Mana dia guna ABC? Then you kena refine because that one is using the traditional. So this one is using the traditional method. Using the traditional method and what happens, you come out with your cost statement then you dapat you punya result of your product cost per unit. Now, what if you guna activity-based costing? So here, reasons for kenapa you nak dia kata you need to refine. What happens? A refined cost system reduces the use of broad averages for assigning cost of resources to cost object. Cost object tadi, whatever product that you have lah. In our case tadi kita ada WD3 and WD2. That is kita punya cost object. The object that you want to determine the cost, your cost object. Kalau dalam yang this one, your cost object will be your app bench and app coaster. So this one is your cost object or your product. This one is your cost object. App coaster is your cost object. Okay, you want to determine the cost for your cost object ataupun your product or your cost object sama lah. Okay, this one. So you want to determine, dia kata kenapa you guna a broad averages. You want to assign your cost of resources to cost object and provide better measurement of the cost of indirect resources. Indirect resources tadi means overhead lah. Means your overhead. Used by different cost object, no matter how different various cost object use indirect resources. So refine a cost system help managers make better decision. So that's why I say it will help you to make better decision, more accurate. Kan? How to allocate your resources to product. Berapa untuk produk A, berapa untuk produk B, berapa untuk WD3, berapa untuk WD2, berapa untuk app bench, berapa untuk app coaster. Better decision and better pricing decision. So Kenapa tadi saya kata the reason kenapa you nak refine, nak fine tune your cost, sebab saya kata productivity diversity. There are a lot of activities coming in. Bukan hanya satu je. So we cannot use only one. We cannot use a single ataupun plan wide tadi, because there are a lot of activity tadi. There are a lot of product diversity in the product. And also saya kata tadi, portion of your indirect cost means your overhead cost now greater portion, increase in your indirect cost. And then competition, there are a lot of competitors in the market, not only one product. You just name it anything, kan? Shampoo, handphone, HP, kan? A lot of competition in the market. So you have to be more competitive in terms of your pricing, in terms of your, then that can also improve in terms of your profitability. So that's the reason why you need to change from the traditional to ABC. And then how to do it? How to do it is about the steps that you need to take when you do the activity-based costing. So sama je daripada activity tadi kepada you need to identify sampai you assign to your cost object. Saya kata cost object can be your product ataupun your service or your customers. Tengoklah sama ada you provide, you prepare product or you provide services. So this one, they give you the steps involved. Saya kata steps involved tadi, some books dia cost, mana tadi, cost hierarchies, batch. Okay, this one ada output, ada batch, ada product sustaining, ada service, ada facility. The same thing, setengah buku yang macam kalau you tengok lagi dekat saya ni, different term being used. Kejap different term advantages. This one, classification of activity level, they're going to unit level, batch level, product level, facility level. Same here lah with the one that you have here, facility, product, kan, batch, output, slightly different term tapi sebenarnya sama lah. Kemudian when you want to implement your activity based costing, when you implement activity based costing, macam saya kata tadi, you first you have your activity tadi, assign what is the basis, kan? Kalau you kata design activity guna parts square feet. Molding machine setup activity guna setup hours. Molding machine operation activity guna molding machine hours. Shipment setup guna shipment. Distribution cubic feet delivered. Administration activity direct manufacturing labor cost, kan? Finally you assign kepada you punya material, saya kata sama, direct labor, direct material sama, kita nak tengok on the overhead tadi. This one is your overhead, kan? So lebih kurang je the one that they are doing, cuma different diagram and so on. But step 1, identify the product tadi, identify the direct cost, select activity. Ini panjang sikit lah you punya ni, dia ada banyak lagi step dia, cuma basicnya adalah the same thing, cuma dia pecah kepada banyak, kan? Yang ni sampai 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, kan? Sama je, cuma activity tu tadi macam my example, I just show divide into 4 activities, kan? So total dia tetap sama, kan? And finally you want to determine what happens. So bila ada 7 dia panjang lagi lah. So you dapat you punya total cost tadi. And then total indirect cost means your overhead lah, or nama lain untuk indirect cost adalah your overhead. So you dapat total cost. So you dapat your total cost, daripada situ you work out dia punya cost per unit. So you dapat dia punya cost per unit. How you get this one sampai you punya total indirect cost. This one is your either you work out for the total or this one is per unit lah. This one is total. Macam mana nak dapat this one? Bahagi je lah dengan total tu tadi, kan? Units tadi. So that's what. Then you compare. You compare between your ABC and the traditional methods. You compare between the traditional and ABC method. What's the difference tadi, kan? Kalau guna simple costing, dia guna the term simple costing. Tadi saya guna perkataan traditional. Tu yang saya kata different books will use different term, but basically they are talking about the same. So you are using the traditional using a single ataupun saya kata tadi plan wide. Okay, satu rate saja. If you use satu rate saja, what happens? Direct material sama, direct labor sama, just that the difference in your indirect cost. Indirect cost ataupun your overhead cost. So that will be different. So you work out and then you find, tengok kat sini tak ada difference. Kalau material labor sama je, then your overhead, what happens to your overhead? So then you look into the benefits lah, the benefits of using ABC. Benefits of using ABC, this one is basically once you understand how it works, then you can understand the benefit of activity-based costing kan. So it's just common sense kan. What are the benefit of having now instead of one rate, you have multiple rate. So when you kata bila multiple rate ni more accurate lah in terms of your costing, how you want to determine, then finally that can have implications sebab you punya revenue minus cost dapat profit. So bila your cost ni is not correct, then what happens to your profit? Profit pun kind of dalam bahasa yang mudahnya salah kan. Kalau your cost pun salah, your profit pun salah. But we are not saying salah lah. We say that the correct term will be your cost is distorted. When your cost is distorted, then what happens to your profit? Your profit will also not reflect the true amount of profit that you need to get. So that is the implication. So when managers decide to implement ABC, that they must make important choices about the level of detail to use. Should managers choose many finely specific activity, cost driver, cost pool? Okay, so this one is more on the internal lah. When you talk about the ABC and so on, they are based on the internal managers. Normally, sebab saya also teach the master students. So when I teach the master students, normally they are managers. I am currently teaching the executive master. Executive master students means executive master students, they are the master students yang memang dah kerja. They are managers, okay, and so on. So I also ask them their feedback in your company. What do you do? Do you use activity-based costing? Well, then normally ABC ni is easier said than done, whereby it's kind of tedious in the manufacturing firm kan, most of the time, sometimes company they just go for the traditional method ataupun they use the word single rate tadi because it is easier. But because if you want to go for the activity based costing for the exam purposes kan, you are being given all this detail, but in the actual, in the real life, they have to identify the activities, they have to identify the cost driver, the cost pool, and so on. And sometimes the difference is not clear enough. They call it arbitrary. Pernah dengar? Arbitrary means macam ragu-ragu ataupun not really clear cut. Yang ini boleh pergi kat A, yang ini boleh pergi dekat B, something like that. So that is also therefore dia kena comes in the decision, the judgment lah by the managers to decide. Okay, to decide on those things. So the main cause and limitations of an ABC system are the measurements necessary to implement it. Dikatakan ABC system require managers to estimate cost of activity pool and then to identify and measure cost driver for that cost pool, and that can be yang the basis for your cost allocation base. So that's the kind of the limitation lah, sebab they can get very detailed kan, they're more complex when you have this one kan, macam that your book ni dia ada 7 activity. How can you identify all these activities? Maybe some organizations they even have more than 10 activities. So how are you going to identify all these activities, the segregation of that activities and so on? But the benefit, you can see lah, the benefit of implementing activity-based costing, and also some behavioral issues with regard to the activity-based costing and so on. This one you can read from your textbook. The technical part is about the calculation. In terms of the calculation, I hope that you understand. This one, I think lah, this one is simpler for you to understand because tadi the diagram here. So just follow this one so that you are able to assign the cost. So you have this one. The idea is that you have the cost, the overhead cost, that overhead cost, whether you are using a single rate or a plant-wide rate, sama, total overhead cost remains the same. Then split into your activity cost pool. Then identify what are the drivers. then you find the rate for each of these cost driver ni, then absorb to your product or cost object. So then you normally you need to compare between the traditional and ABC and comment, sorry, whether that have been, what happens, whether that has overstated or understated your product, and the bigger picture of the implication of that. So I think you are tired already, because the next one is just a little bit on activity-based management. So on activity-based management is basically still you are looking at ABC, but you are looking at the management of it. The activity-based, you manage that activity-based management is a method of management decision making. Again, you are using the activity-based costing information to improve your customer satisfaction and profitability. Why? Because as I said, finally, what do you do with your cost? Kan tadi revenue minus cost, you will get your profit if it is positive. Now, you are looking at ABC is here. ABC is about managing your cost, basically managing your overhead cost, or that is called as indirect cost tadi. So ABC is about managing your overhead or indirect cost, and that can affect your profit. How do you get your profit? You get your profit from the customers. When customers purchase your product, you will get your profit. So activity-based management is about the management decision making. Now you employ, you utilize activity-based costing information so that you can finally enhance your profit and enhance your customer satisfaction. Because when customers are satisfied, they will buy more of your product. When they buy more of your product, it will be translated into more profit for your company. So that's the idea of activity-based management. I think up to there only you need to know for the activity-based management, but I'm not sure about your syllabus. But the normally for the technical part, you just need to be able to calculate. You need to be able to calculate your activity base and the single rate tadi, and then make the comparison. So like this one, you can do some questions daripada your textbook, also have the solutions. You look at this one and then can relate to the this one, they relate kepada revenue, the percentage of the profit. But this one tadi sama kan, you are taking the total cost divided by your basis, then you dapat the rate. From that rate, then you work out you punya this one sampai you dapat the operating income. This one dia maksudnya bila operating income you include sekali lah your other cost, the material, labor and so on. So I think that's all from me. Any questions? Do you have any more questions?
Ya, Zoom siapa tuh yang bocor tuh? Ada adiknya yang manggil-manggil. Olivia, itu Zoom-nya.
Okey, saya pass kepada the host, Ibu Hasna.
Iya, terima kasih sekali Ibu Raja Azrin atas perkuliahannya yang sangat menarik ya. Ini masih ada yang mau bertanya? Ini question for Mrs. Azrin? Tak ada? Sebelum kita tutup perkuliahan ini, mungkin kita akan ambil foto bersama. Tolong kameranya on cam semua. Mas Ipul bisa bantu saya untuk mengambil screenshot para student.
Oke Ibu, silakan nyalakan kamera semua ya. Ada 4 slide.
Ya, slide pertama.
Slide pertama 1, 2, 3. Slide kedua 1, 2, 3. Slide ketiga 1, 2, 3. Yang terakhir slide keempat 1, 2, 3. Oke, Bu.
Oke, makasih Mas Ipul. Okay, dear colleagues and our dear student, that's for today, the activity-based costing and activity-based management lecture by our distinguished guest, Professor Madya Dr. Raja Azrin Raja Ahmad from UiTM Cawangan Johor. Hopefully, this collaboration teaching with UiTM Johor will not be the last, but
Alright.
will continue in the future with various different lectures from UiTM. So, Mrs. Azrin, we would like to thank you very much for the interesting lecture. And hopefully we can see you again, maybe in Malaysia, or maybe you
Alright.
come to our campus in Jakarta.
Alright, okay, inshallah.
Okay. Yeah, if there
Okay,
are
thank you
any
very much.
shortcoming, yeah, in this event, please forgive us.
Alright, no problem, no problem.
Yeah.
Alright,
Thank
okay.
you, Mrs. Azrin.
Okay.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. Thank you very much to you and the students as well. Alright.
Okay, you're
Okay, bye-bye.
welcome.
Alright.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Makasih semua. Jangan lupa buat PR-nya ya, buat ringkasan lalu dikumpul. Oke, sampai ketemu di kelas masing-masing.
Ya.